I found out that the former Moto2 and MotoAmerica Superbike champion Toni Elias was offering coaching in Supermoto and jumped at the chance to ride with one of the best. Having someone as good as Toni look at my riding, showing me his riding system, as well as help me set up my bike is an opportunity I didn't want to miss. We met up at Apex Racing Center in Southern California, a very popular track for supermoto riders in the US. First, he wanted to see what level of riding I'm at. So in the first riding session, he followed me around for about 7 laps, just looking at my riding. He then passed me to show me the line, braking, turn-in, and acceleration points. After the first session, we sat down and talked about what he had observed in my riding. One of the first things he picked up on is that I'm too aggressive on the throttle in some corners where I should actually be going slower, in order to gain speed in other sections on the track. Whereas Toni described it, you should take a coffee in these corners. Trying this out after he had told me about it felt wrong initially, because it felt like I was losing speed by not being on the throttle. But once I saw how much speed I could gain and also how much safer it is to ride this way, it started making a lot of sense. Another thing he saw is that I'm not using the rear brake at all. I'm used to just using the front, only using engine brake in the rear. Toni told me that the rear brake should for sure be used, because it stabilizes the bike, compressing the rear suspension and lowering the entire bike, providing more grip. To prove his point, he had me ride around for 5 laps only being allowed to use the rear brake. This was a big revelation for me, because after 3 laps my lap times were only slightly off my lap times only using the front brakes. The rear brake provided way more stopping power than I had expected. After the 5 laps I started using the front again, combining the front and rear brakes. This helped a lot, feeling much more confident on the brakes going into corners. He showed me a simple riding system with different types of corners and how to approach each corner. I promise not to share this in too much detail, so you have to get a coaching day with Toni to learn about it. The area I needed to improve the most is braking later into slower corners. I have a tendency to brake too early and then end up waiting to get on the throttle, instead of just braking really hard, getting the bike turned over and getting on the throttle. Another thing Toni observed when I was riding was that my bike is very low in the rear and high in the front. This is making it understeer and shatter in corners. He also took my bike out for a spin to see how my setup was working. My suspension and geometry setup needs a lot of work to give me optimum grip. As he had seen, the rear was too low, which was a combination of too much sag, too much rebound damping, having a too soft spring, as well as having changed the linkage geometry, which had made my bike way lower than the stock bike in the rear. To try and solve this temporarily, we changed the preload on the rear, thus reducing the amount of sag, and decreased the amount of rebound damping. This did wonders out on the track, making me feel much more confident in the corners, feeling how the bike was much more level. The same problem with too soft springs was present in the front forks, but the bike was also riding high up front, essentially making the bike lean backwards. So we moved the forks up in the triple clamps to help fix this. This helped so much you can't believe it. I had so much more feel for front grip this way. With the coaching and changes to my bike, I was able to run solid 44.5 second lap times, which is a really good pace for me. Toni believed that with some more practice, the right springs and linkage geometry for the rear, I should be able to get this down to 43 seconds, which would make me really competitive at this track. I learned a ton during the day, feeling much more confident everywhere. As Toni said, the more confident you are, the more you can experiment with different things, like braking at different points, new lines, being more smooth on the throttle, or being more aggressive on the throttle. If you're a racer and you want to improve, you should definitely consider getting professional coaching, even if it's not with a world champion. There's always something new to learn.